here. We are now connecting to Facebook. Just give us 1 minute and we'll go ahead and get started on this next C3. All right, we are connecting to the caregiver community. As it connects, I know some of you will start seeing us, so give us 1 second. We'll be connecting to Facebook Live here and let our attendees start rolling in. So we will get started on this C3 shortly. And I can see we are live on the caregiver, Hidden Heroes caregiver community right now. Okay, great. I see more attendees joining us, which is awesome. Thank you guys so much for being with here today. Okay. All right, well, we are hitting the 5 o'clock dot here, so I want to go ahead and get started. First, let me just say Happy New Year and welcome everyone. C3 is back and ready to engage and connect and empower the caregiver community. I'm your host, Jasmine Alfonso. I'm the manager of City and Community Initiatives with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We are so excited that you're able to join us for today's webinar series, the Caregiver Community Connection C3, presented by the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and powered by our partners at the Wounded Warrior Project. Our goal is to bring military and veteran and family caregivers engaging content on important topics to provide opportunities for peer connection and support. We're also very pleased to have the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs join us as partners for this series as well. Today, we're kicking off our C3 series with today's webinar, Helping Our Hidden Helpers, the Role of a Military Children, that will feature Camp Corral. Our own Dole Caregiver Fellow, Cara Benson, is here today, as well as from Camp Corral, Hannah Hutler. In today's episode, we will discuss how to recognize those caregivers' youth's dedication to their family and identify ways to overcome the challenges they face. Before we get started, I wanted to mention to all the attendees that this is a recorded broadcast, and we're always open to suggestions for future topics or future speakers that you think should be featured in this series. Please always send us any ideas that you have. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we'll take questions at the end of the webinar. Be sure to submit any questions you have using the Q&A box that's located in the bottom of your Zoom control panel. We'll also be taking notes of all the questions that we get answered live during the Q&A portion of today's programming. As an added bonus, we'll be selecting 4 winners during the episode that will receive a $25 Amazon e-gift card. So the way to enter to win that gift card is to engage with us. So comment on Zoom or on Facebook Live. So for those joining us through Facebook Live, our Hidden Heroes Caregiver community page, welcome. Please submit any questions you have by commenting on the video. We'll also be putting poll questions within that video so that you are able to participate as well. So please use the comment section of the video and engage with us. A recording from today's webinar will also be shared following today's session in an email, and this video will live on the Hidden Heroes Caregiver community page for you to reference back to. Before we get started, I wanted to, before we bring out our presenters, just launch a poll. We'd love to learn a little bit about our audience here. So I'm going to launch a poll here. And so we just want to ask a few questions to our attendees. We'll also be putting this poll on our Hidden Heroes community page. So the question here is, have you heard of Camp Corral before today's episode? And then the second question, have your children or child attended Camp Corral? Has your child or children served in a secondary caregiving role in your home? So whether you be able to answer those questions for us, just so that we can gauge the audience and understand where everybody's coming from right now. Okay, great. So without further ado, I want to be able to present our speakers for today. So again, joining us from Camp Corral, Hannah Hutler, and Dole Caregiver Fellow, Cara Benson, representing the state of Florida. I'll let you guys take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I am Hannah. I am a program officer for Camp Corral. I am also an Army veteran spouse and step parent to two semi-grown military children. Um, Our mission at Camp Corral is to transform the lives of children of wounded, ill, injured, and fallen military heroes by providing them a unique summer camp experience and other recreational opportunities. We've been doing this for 10 years. Of course, over the last year, we've had to adapt our programs and make some changes along the way, have some virtual offerings. But our four main goals are always the same: to provide a connection for military kids, to give them the opportunity to build coping and confidence, and as well as have some respite away from their family, away from home, away from the stressors that just come with being a military kid. Uh, and my counterpart, Cara, is also going to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Cara Benson. I am a Dole Fellow for the state of Florida. We just recently moved down here because warm weather was needed. I am the wife and caregiver of also an Army veteran, and we have 5 children. I have homeschooled them for over a decade. Prior to being a full-time caregiver, I ran a nonprofit, I taught college, and I also, way back in my work history, helped administer school. So when everything went sideways, it made a lot of sense to step into homeschooling, and then we had kids come along. Our kids have been raised homeschooling and in the VA. The ages, just so you know, my oldest is now 17 and is finishing up high school this summer, and our youngest is 5 and just started kindergarten. So that you know a little bit about us, we have 2 special needs children in that mix. So not to say that we've seen it all, but we get kind of a big dichotomy over here. And the children are always kind of on my heart because we don't talk about a lot about what the children do in the home to support the wounded warrior and the family. Often those resources are focused on the veteran and not so much the family, especially from the VA side. So I am so excited to be here tonight to talk with Hannah and all of you about how we can support the kids who aren't doing life normally, just kind of like we're not doing life normally.
Awesome. Thank you, Cara. I think that's a perfect segue into, we really wanted to talk about just the awareness of the role of children in our households and caregiving households and military households in general. So over the last 10 years, what our research has anecdotally been telling us is that our military children are taking on greater roles, or they see themselves as taking on greater roles than their peers are in their households. We also heard this past year from parents that about 35% of our participant children do serve in that hidden helper, secondary caregiver kind of role in their household. Cara, I would love to hear from you a little bit about how you've seen this in the community, and how you think this role in the house impacts our kids.
Well, and I think that's a good thing to talk about. We deal with our abnormal as caregivers and veterans and wounded, ill, injured. We have our abnormal, and we don't really think about it much in the grand scheme of things because it's our normal, right? And so it's really hard to explain, and even for sometimes for us to admit that our kids are stepping into a secondary caregiving role when not that we're asking them to do it. Great example. My 5-year-old, my husband has a medication dispenser that beeps. Okay, dad doesn't always hear it. And the joke in the house is one too many bombs, right? Dad doesn't always hear it. So the 5-year-old will grab it when it beeps and bring it to him. That is an atypical thing for a child to do. Is it a big thing? Is it a burden on her? Probably not. She loves to have that special little role, but it is completely normal for us and completely abnormal for the rest of the world. A lot of them are looking at us and going, well, why are you making the 5-year-old take his medication to him? I'm not, she stepped into this. Another prime example is one of my special needs children has taken upon themselves. They get very anxious. And so his thing is he has to lock all the doors at night. Dad may forget. So every night before he goes to bed, he walks around the house and he closes the door. He makes sure the doors are locked, the garage is down, yada, yada, yada. Is that something that we consider abnormal in my household? No, he's very comfortable with it. It's something he wanted to do. It's something that makes him relax and de-stress. But it is considered secondary caregiving. Um, how many of us have children who maybe, help dad or, mom calm down, brother, sister, whatever that is. It's important for us to talk to the fact that our kids are indeed living a little bit abnormally. They need a little bit more support because of that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think they learn a great amount of empathy and love and, giving. I think these are all wonderful things. But I think as parents, we need to realize that our children are growing up slightly different than we did. And how can we support them in that?
Yeah, I think you said it a couple of times, but it's normal for us. And what I've heard multiple times doing interviews with parents, and recently talking to a researcher who's in the youth caregiving field, this is just our day to day. Sometimes you don't realize, oh yeah, my child is doing this every day. I talked to a parent semi recently and asked, is your child providing any sort of care in your household? And mom was like, well, no, not really, not that I can think of. And then she thought about it for a second. She's like, actually, you know what? Since my knee replacement, anytime I need to get up out of a chair or get out of bed, my child is there to help me move around the house. And I think that's one of those things that it's just normal. I think we hear kids a lot tell us how much pride they have in that they're helping their family. I think that's really important to mention, that it may not be normal, but for that child, they have this sense of responsibility, and this is my task, and this is what I do, and I'm helping my family in that way. I think that's one of those things that we have to keep in mind is, yes, it may be an added burden and it may not be normal, but for our kids, it's there every day and they wouldn't change it and they don't know any different.
Exactly. And I think that's really important because it may be abnormal, but it doesn't mean it's bad. And this is really, a lot of times our kids walk into these roles. They want to help. They want to do something good. I know, another caregiver who's, when he's in pain, he's an amputee, his kids help rub out his leg, what's left. It's not a bad thing. But it is something that we need to understand, that they might need a little bit more support. And that's where we really talk about, helping them build their self-confidence and helping them, because they might see maturity a little bit earlier and it might see it a little bit different. So, and, a great point is a lot of times these extra roles they take on, while they're not necessarily bad, can cause a little bit more anxiety, a little bit more of those worries of the world that most kids may not even deal with. And so how do we support that? And I think it's important to understand too, especially if you have a veteran who is deployed to the Middle East, we have a higher rate of social or special needs than the general population. And so it's important to realize that when we have kids with special needs, their anxiety is also upped. So we have all of this kind of playing together in a very interesting picture and a very unique demographic when we speak of veteran children or children who were raised in a veteran household. And for one, I'm thankful we're finally figuring this out, and so we can start to support the kids in this role. But I think to talk about the anxiety and the mental health cost that can be caused, we talk about a lot on caregiver side, right? Your caregiving, make sure you take your self-care. I think sometimes we totally forget that why the burden isn't as heavy for our kids. They need as much support as we do as caregivers. So I know, not to jump the gun, but I know we talked a little bit about just recognizing good mental health for your kids. The signs in children that they're struggling with their mental health are completely different than what you would see in a normal adult. Are you with me? Some odd things, eating their hair, chewing their hair, picking at nails or bodies, pacing. What else do you want to throw in there?
I think it's, we see a lot of those same things when we train our staff at camp. We train them to look for anxiety in children, particularly around homesickness. At camp, that's a big thing, leaving home. And exactly what you're saying, looking for those subtle signs. What are those abnormal changes in behavior. It may not be something big. It may just be, you know, my child is taking a lot of walks around the house, and that isn't normal. What is happening here? Frequent stomach aches or headaches, I think, are always a really good thing to delve into a little bit more. It may not necessarily need to be, let's go to the minute clinic, but tell me why your stomach is rumbly today, or tell me why you think you're having a lot of these headaches. Is there something more going on? It's one of those things, you know, kids don't always have the words to articulate how they're feeling. And so those feelings come out in different ways that sometimes for us as adults, it's hard to recognize, oh, this is not just an annoying habit my child has developed today. Because we all have those moments, right? I'm like, oh no, please, let's not do this.
Absolutely.
But recognizing and looking a little bit deeper and like, oh, maybe there's something else going on here, and maybe we need to talk about this and address it. I think you brought up two other really good points earlier. The maturity thing, that is something that we hear all the time from camp counselors at Camp Corral is, these kids are so respectful. They're much more mature for their age. The older campers want to help take care of the younger campers. And it's really sweet and wonderful to see that. And I think at camp, everybody else kind of bridging the civilian military divide gets a lot out of that. But it's also something important to recognize that our children may be taking steps further in maturity than their peers, especially emotionally and mentally, as they're coping with changes in their household.
Yes, sorry, I was answering a comment. Somebody made a really good comment about special needs, and I wanted to just, I'll kind of throw it out there for everyone. I can get the exact figures. Last time I looked at the figures, we're dealing with a rate about 2 times higher than general population for special needs. So just throwing that out there, and I can get the exact figures. But anyway, okay. Yes, no, and I'm so glad actually you brought up the headaches and the stomach aches. We see this a lot in special needs or non-neurotypical children as well. And I love the fact that you brought up the kids can't necessarily tell you, oh, I have a headache because I don't want to deal with this today, or I have a stomach ache because I'm worried about this. And I think some of the things we can do is work on fostering, and we'll talk about this later, but fostering a sense of a relationship outside the wounded, ill, or injured, I think is really vital. Because if you can take a few minutes away and you can come out with that particular child and say, you've been having a lot of tummy aches lately. Is there something that's upsetting you in your diet? Is there something that we need to, is it bad enough we need to go to a doctor? Is there something you've been worried about, something keeping you up at night? How many of us have kids who sleep weird schedules or insomnia? I know it's totally normal in my home. And I think one of the things, and I say this especially as a homeschool mom, it's really, really important to help your kid find a tribe that they can rely on. Don't ever be afraid to go ask for help for your kids. Therapy is wonderful. That's what it's there for. Child therapy is especially good for especially the younger ones or the middle schools, the ones that need trouble. We talked a little bit about maturity, and as they mature, sometimes they don't get all the skills that comes with that maturity. So taking them to a therapist isn't necessarily saying they're, the world's dying or whatever, but to take them and say, the therapist in them, it's a safe zone for them, and they can go and talk about everything that bugs them, but the therapist can also teach them how to talk about the problems. My stomach hurts. Well, I've noticed that I haven't slept well because I've been worried maybe dad's deployed, maybe dad's not back, whatever it is. We talk about active military children still, it is hard for a kid to think dad may or may not come home this time. We may or may not get a call from dad. I love the news article for the kids who use the ring. Did you see this? That the kids used the ring to talk to their deployed father. I loved it. They figured out he got dinged over there. And so he would look at the emails and they'd send him a message every day on the way to school. It's not normal, but it's normal for us, right? So having the kids go to therapists so they can actually talk about that and learn how to talk about it is good. So don't ever feel bad about reaching out for therapists or reaching out for help for your children. I do support calling a therapist ahead of time and saying, this is our situation. Are you familiar with it? Are you comfortable with it? Um, I think a lot of us have realized that disabled parental rights aren't necessarily where they all need to be. You do have some resources about, some helps for parenting with disabilities, because if we're here, that's part of our life too. So sometimes it's really good because you might step to a therapist who's like, this is really abnormal. So it might be good to call ahead the therapist and say, this is our situation. Are you comfortable with it? It would be very similar to calling ahead and finding a trauma therapist for someone with PTSD, which, we're familiar with that, right? This is no different. Also, never be afraid to fire a therapist that's not working. Either your kid is not meshing. If your kid comes home and says, look, I'm uncomfortable, therapy is not necessarily going to work. Rule in our house was you give them 2 sessions. Unless something really, really went helpful, wacky, you give them 2 sessions. And if you're still not comfortable, we'll find someone else. I will say, I saw a question scroll through. I'm trying to catch them. I'm not catching them all. I saw a question come through about rural areas. Okay, silver lining to COVID. We have telehealth resources. We have a lot of therapists going telehealth, video health. They may ask you to come in for 1 or 2 sessions to establish rapport and then be perfectly comfortable working like that. It's very, very hard with younger children in play therapy. I will tell you that even in my area, in Florida, where we have kind of higher numbers, we are still seeing those come back up. And so anyway, kind of realizing that, so finding help, realizing that you're aware that finding help is not a negative thing, but do protect yourself when you find help. Make sure that you know what you're kind of walking into. And anyway, okay, I lost. Sorry. Helping kids find tribe. We talked about that too. I think that's important too with kids in our situation. Your kid can go to school and have friends all day and have no one in a class of 25 who understands their situation, especially if you're rural, especially if you're not in an area where you have a lot of veteran or wounded warriors. So how do you deal with that? I think that's one of the things that Camp Corral does so perfectly. My kids have been, not all of them, but some of them. And the ones that did go have friends that they call every week. They write, they pen pal. And I'm not saying that's all going to happen just because they went to camp. We hope that it does, right? Because that's part of the fun of Camp Corral is you have kids going to other kids who get it, right? They get moving every 3 years. They get worrying about the family member that's deployed. They get the VA. Go ahead, ask my kids, how they feel about sitting in hospitals all day. These kids at Camp Corral, they get it. And so they can bond on a different level than maybe a classroom of 25 who have a more normal perspective. So don't be afraid to foster tribe for your kid wherever they find them, whether it be camp or, dance class or whatever other thing that you can get them involved in. I know kids who met at a Wounded Warrior Project event, at a family event, and they keep touch that way. So foster connection for your kids. That's their support system, right? We have our own as caregivers, but that's a beautiful one for them.
Yeah, and I think, just as parents are making friends as caregivers, to ask your caregiver friends if they have children of a similar age. You got to find a tribe somehow. And we talk a lot about not wanting to exaggerate the burden, but if there's already somebody you're talking to and like, oh, hey, you have a child about my child's age, maybe we can get them connected through whatever avenue it is, social media, mixed feelings, pen pal, email, phone calls, that kind of stuff. So they can develop that tribe, even if there isn't somebody in their school, in their county, locally that they can be friends with, to find somebody else who can be that friend who gets it. We hear that a lot from our campers, that this is the first time that they've had that experience where they don't have to explain what's going on with their family. A lot of times kids will tell us that, I don't necessarily like having friends at home because they don't get it. And I have to explain all of the strange things that happen that are normal to me, but strange to them. And so being able to find somebody else of like, oh, this happened today, or I have to go sit at the VA tomorrow for an appointment, is crucial for kids to just have that connection, especially as they get older and, from, child development, that those peer connections become even more important for them.
Or even the reality of, my husband's in a wheelchair. So even the reality of, look, I wanted to go to this, but it's not accessible. We can't go. Or the reality of being adaptive. This is not something a lot of people face. So I love having those connections. I love fostering those connections. And let's be honest about the challenges of connections, right? As families who are in the situation we are, finances and time are both often huge barriers.
Mhm.
How can we, you talked about dance class, right? So how can we afford that for our kids? Um, I get it 100%, and not saying that it has to be everything. There's a lot. I always encourage you to find free resources where you live, always. But know that there are resources that can help you, pay for those kind of things if that is a financial barrier. Time is always a huge barrier, especially when we do spend a lot of time at the VA, because we all know that, or, any hospital, not just the VA, any hospital, if you're going for treatments or any doctor's appointments, if you have 3 or 4, we had one week, we had 18 appointments in a week. How do you carve out time? Let's be realistic. And part of that was combining with other caregivers that had children that, especially with COVID, we couldn't take the kids with. So they helped me watch kids. They, just that kind of look for people who carpool. There are ways to kind of work towards that, but you might have to get, creative. So I highly suggest just thinking about that, because those are both real barriers, and I don't want to sugarcoat this. We need to look at what our life is really like, right? Camp Corral is phenomenal because there's not a financial burden to go there. Well, you have to drive them to wherever the camp may be. But beyond that, once they're there, it's all taken care of. And so it is truly barrier free for our children to go get respite and to find tribe and to de-stress, because sometimes they do need that break, just as we do. So I did want to talk kind of about barriers, and I'm sure there's probably more, but those are the two that I can think of kind of off the top of my head is, how do we how do we move beyond barriers? So sometimes it is creative thinking. Sometimes it's resource sharing. Don't ever be afraid to look online for resources. I know hiddenheroes.org has a phenomenal searchable database, Patriot Link. Another resource we talked about too, I think in the handout, is NAMI if you're looking for mental health care. I'm sorry, yeah, hiddenheroes.org. I know we talked about NAMI. If you're looking for care in your area, they break it down by state. So that is an amazing resource. But don't be afraid to go looking. There are tons of resource banks out there to help us connect with what we need.
Yeah. And we do have a handout that has a bunch of those resources on it that we're going to share in just a minute. I do want to circle back a little bit. And as Cara and I have talked, there are some hard topics to talk about with caregiving youth. We recently included questions about self-harm and suicide attempts on our survey with our parents. And it was close to 10% of parents said that their child had attempted or participated in one or the other of those. And I think it's something that we don't really want to talk about in our community. It's really hard to talk about. And even if your child has experienced those things, it does not mean you are a bad parent. We all have some of those mental health challenges as we go through life, recognizing that your child is facing some of those things does make you a good parent. And Cara, I know you've had some experience with the community around this. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what you've seen out in the field with caregivers?
I think the first thing to know is you're not alone. You are not alone. I went to retreat, and probably, I would say, over a third of the caregivers at the retreat talked about this topic, because we had had personal experience with it. First, you're not alone. Second, don't be ashamed of it. And it's time, and it's okay to get help. Depending on your insurance situation, know that there are a ton of resources out there. If you run into blocks, depending on where you are, first things first, if you have a child who is having those kind of issues, realize there's always the urgent care that an ER will provide. Let's just be honest. Even during COVID, okay, you can walk into an ER and get your child stabilized. I also, Psychology Today, Psychiatry Today, they also list health centers. They not only list therapists and psychiatrists or psychologists in your area, they also list institutions. Get on it. Seriously, get on it, punch in your zip code, tell them that you're looking for an institution. You can check adolescent, you can check teen, you can check beneath 10. It'll populate, and they'll tell you who does acute care, which is you had a child who attempted, or you have a child who's cutting, and they take them and stabilize them, and who does long-term residential care. And that's kind of another animal. But don't be afraid to call that acute care center if you need it and say, I have. And when do you need it? Let's be honest. When do you need it? You need it if you find out your child has a plan and is taking action. And as hard as that is to see, as hard as that is to talk about, if you find that, then it's time to get your child more significant help. And don't be afraid to get those acute care centers. That is what they do. And by the way, those are considered hospitals. So if you're worried about insurance or funding, those run under the same rules that hospitals run under. So Medicaid, TRICARE, Champus, Champ VA, whatever you have, those will be covered, even if it's private or not private.
Yeah, I think we have a couple questions about those resources. I think most of those are included in our handout as well, but are easy to Google too. And again, I just want to reiterate, you're not alone. Even I am not a caregiver, but even just as military children, we have experienced this in our household as well. And it hits you hard, but there are people out there who will love and support and help you find the resources to get care for your kids.
And realize there are resources too. If you're not that far, but your child is cutting or anything like that, realize there's resources. I know one of the ones we put on the handout is actually, I think it's called Calm Cut. So it's actually a calming thing. If you have a child who wants to cut, they can pop into that app, and it will actually, it's put out by psychiatrists. It'll actually help them calm down and kind of get them past that time. I know we keep referencing this handout, right? So, but huge thing, you're not alone. Don't be ashamed, and don't be afraid to get help.
Yeah, we definitely can't reiterate that enough. One of the little toot our horn for Camp Corral is over 50% of our parents see improved mental health in their children after participating in camp. But your child doesn't have to just attend Camp Corral. Again, some of those other things we've talked about, helping them find their tribe, their community, people to talk to, that support piece is such a huge piece of what Camp Corral does. Sometimes you can recreate that at home for your kids. Also giving them that respite time away, just as caregivers need some respite time. It's important for your kids too, especially if they're serving in that hidden helper caregiver role. So on this handout, we've got a bunch of different trying to eliminate barriers kind of things to do with your children or options to give your children to get some of that respite, to help build their coping skills, and to just give them time to process. One of my favorite that is kind of a laughing stock thing is a fidget toy. I keep a chapstick on my desk that I can pop back and forth and play with my fidget toy when I'm anxious or nervous or just need something to focus myself.
I don't know if everybody can see this. I stole my child's fidget toy. Do you see this? It clicks, it moves, it does everything, right?
Yeah.
But I'm glad you broke it up because, here's the thing is we do this seminar and you're like, okay, this was really, somewhat heavy, but it's all big stuff. So how can we do small stuff? So we have a ton of small everyday things that you can do to kind of help out with your child at home. We've got, I think they're scrolling through it right now. We've got signs of stress, signs of distress, when to start like really paying attention. But somewhere in there is this beautiful resources. Here's all the resources we were talking about. So there's all these. So what are these free things I can do at home to help my kid, right? One of the biggest things I saw shift my home anxiety-wise in my kids, and this sounds so stupid, is put up a calendar. We put up a huge whiteboard calendar and everything is on it. And believe it or not, I have a child who's like really kind of weird about food. So we put up a menu. These two things, I tell you, were mind-breaking because our kids lost the anxiety of wondering what was coming for the day. They could look a whole month out and go, I know it's going to hit today. I know it's going to be okay. For the kid who's a little bit weird about food, they also didn't worry about what was coming to dinner that night. So that sounds really silly, but it was very, very small. And it was a huge difference in the anxiety levels of the kids in the house. And, talking about positive self-image too, we're coming into February and I saw this on the social media. They were talking about sticking a heart with a positive affirmation on your kid's door from February 1st to February 14th, right? Valentine's Day. I'm going to encourage you all. We gave you a long list for child affirmations, right? Positive self-image building and positive building for your kids. We as parents are so good at telling our kids what they're doing wrong, right? We are, that's like, I always tell my kids, there's a difference between negative attention and positive attention, all right? So let's focus on pouring out some positive love and positive attention for our kids. And here's the list of affirmations coming up. Some of them are things I would have never thought of, but I use this list and I love this list. And I would encourage every single one of you to write one on a piece of paper, stick it on your child's door, surprise them, stick it in their lunchbox, whatever, right? Because the more we can do to positively support our kids, it's just like when we get positive support, the better we can kind of help their mental health.
Yeah, this is definitely, I will call myself out, something I am working on in our house. Instead of nitpicking, acknowledging when things are going really well and being able to say, hey, I really appreciate what you just did there. Or, you know what, you're really good at X and that's awesome. Well, sometimes it's a challenge.
It's really easy to say, you should have unloaded the dishwasher like you were supposed to, right?
Yes.
It's a lot harder to say, you know what? I watched you get up and pour a bowl of cereal for your sister this morning because she couldn't reach the bottle by herself. I'm so proud of you for thinking for somebody else, or, for thinking to help someone else. So kind of like you said, is pulling out those positives too.
Exactly. I think one of the things that you had shared too earlier, circling back to the calendar, sometimes it's hard when we don't want to add to the burden that's already in the household. So if you have the time to do a calendar, that's phenomenal. One of the things we've talked about before is, do you have time to do just one routine thing? If it's one routine thing a week or one routine thing a month, we have this one set time where we're going to watch a family movie together, or we're going to go for a walk, or we're going to do X, to have that one thing, even if it's not all of the things that kids can look forward to and that you as a parent can look forward to. Yes, I just got to get through these next couple of days and we're going to have this awesome movie night, or we're going to order pizza. Exciting things. Of course, sometimes pizza gets a little routine in our house.
Pizza and a movie night, right? Right? Like, make Fridays, phenomenal. We talked too about, those small routine things and allowing your kids, encouraging your kids to take 5-minute breaks. I love the idea of a 5-minute break, whether it be a dance session, whether it be, my husband has migraines. And so there are times when the house has to be really, really quiet. It's very hard for kids. I'm like, go take whatever you want to play music on, go outside in the backyard and jam. Like, I don't care if you wake up the neighbors. I mean, it's 11. They should be up anyway, right? I mean, go. It's a joke, guys. But go let them take that break too, and encourage them to take that break. Searching for that connect to outside of the household is always such a good thing. So, exercise, I can't encourage healthy eating enough too, because it gets really, really easy. Like you said, pizza, whatever's in the freezer that I can heat up, right? We made an effort to kind of, and not everybody wants to do this, but we made an effort to like even the kids, no sodas, no extra sugars. It's what we do to kind of help out. If you have something like that, encourage it. Even if it's a 5-minute walk with your kids, sometimes at the end of the day, I'll take a few kids and we'll go walk the block. It's like 15 minutes, but they can download their day to me. We get a little bit of exercise in, and I can ask them questions about their day, and they love it because it's one-on-one time, right? There's no other burdens. It's just us walking. Don't tell them this, even my 12 and 13-year-old love it. So don't tell them I realized. So there's a lot of other things on there. I know we're kind of coming up to the Q&A section, but I just wanted to just reiterate is, don't hesitate to use any of these, and don't think that you have to do them all at once either.
Yeah, pick and choose what fits into your schedule, what doesn't add to the burden already in your home, but can help alleviate some of the stress, some of the anxiety and those things. And honestly, all of our suggestions are not going to be for everyone, and we recognize that. It's all about finding what works for you and your family, but making that effort to find something to give you a little bit of peace and sanity and give your children that opportunity for some respite, building some of those coping skills to feed into positive mental health, which is so, so important. I think we have covered the vast majority of our materials. I'm impressed. Yes, I think we may be ready a little bit early for Q&A if y'all are ready for that. Unless, Cara, you have anything else you want to share?
No, I know we're kind of wrapping up. We can go ahead and start Q&A if you want. So I know there was a lot that came in. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is not to be a burden. We listed a whole lot of resources and a whole lot of small things to do. I like coming out of a workshop with even one thing that just strikes me that I can go, oh, I can do this. This is one small thing I can tackle that might help. And if you have that, great. So this is not to throw more stuff at our already full lives.
Okay, great. Hannah and Cara, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of connection issues over here. So if I break up, my colleague is going to step in here. So much information. I want to make sure we have some time to get through the Q&A. But before we do, I want to go ahead and announce some of the prize winners here. My colleague, Colton Whitaker, will be getting your information in here for those who win that Amazon gift card. So we just need your email and we'll be sending that out to you. So the 4 winners are going to be Andrea Dorsey, Michelle Chimbley, Leah Hansel, Bethany Travis. So we'll be reaching out. Sorry if I butchered any of your names. We'll be sending you out the Amazon e-gift card. Colton will put those prize winners in the chat box. So we'll be able to send those out to you. Now, I know there's a lot of questions coming through here that want to ask you guys about. First one that came in, what are the ages for Camp Corral?
Great question. We currently serve in our summer camp program ages 8 to 15. Other programs, however, are open to other ages, but that is our main program at this point.
Okay, great. And another question that came in here is this recommended for children whose parents are already out of the military? We have a 16-year-old and my husband and I met. She was 6 and he was in the process of getting out of the military and had already done his deployment. So are they eligible?
They are eligible to participate. So our program is, the vast majority of our participants, about 70% or more of our participants, come from veteran households because we do serve that wounded, injured, ill bracket of families. There aren't a lot of resources for those families who have separated, as we've talked about. And so it is our mission to be able to provide a resource for those of you, especially who are no longer in the military, but still have that, the veteran in the household.
Okay.
Or even kids who don't have a veteran in the household anymore through divorce or incarceration or anything like that.
Okay, great. And then another question came in, what kind of resources are available for caregiving teens? Are there any 24/7 phone hotlines for military teens, especially those that are dealing with high anxiety?
That's a great question. Cara, do you know?
There are indeed several, and I don't know that I put them in the resource. There are indeed several 24/7 chats for teens under mental health. Maybe I can search out those and add them to the file or add them in a comment box under it. I can see it in my head, but I can't remember the name. You know, there's always the suicide hotline that is open to anyone of any age. There is another organization that just launched that is texting too, which we find very common in our teens, and it's a very comfortable for them that is less intrusive to reach out for help. So I'll see if I can find it, but there are ones out there for teens and others.
Okay, perfect. Any suggestions for coping with anxiety for if you're 10 years old or under? So for younger children, any help for dealing with their anxiety?
Yes, absolutely. I highly recommend, especially for the really young ones, play therapy. If you can find a play therapist or a child therapist in your area. I think it's important to understand if you have an anxious child, what triggers are causing them to be anxious, and supporting them mentally, and kind of supporting respite for them too. And yes, it's very hard to, go have respite like we have respite, but simple things will help, with that anxiety for those younger ones. If you take them out, exercise, walk with them. I'm not saying it's like picture perfect. I would always recommend therapy if you have high anxiety and they need even skills searching with that. If they go to school, you also might be able to sign them up through a strategies teacher there who can help them in the classroom as well, or they might be able to have one-on-one time at the school dealing with what they call learning or coping strategies.
Yeah, I think Cara really makes a good point too of therapy doesn't have to be just for the extreme end of the spectrum. At camp, we really like to be proactive and jump on challenges before they become a big thing. Starting that therapy when you first see those signs may be hugely beneficial for your child down the road to learn those skills.
Great, thank you guys so much. Another question that came in is, and that we can answer right here actually. So if you look at the screen ahead, They're asking where they can get more information on Camp Corral. So that handout that I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending around an email that was also sent in the chat box that has a lot of information that Hannah and Cara have talked about. Also, if you see the screen here for Camp Corral's website, you'll be able to get some more of that information. Another question that came in here, what was the name of the app for kids who are cutting?
I think it's Cut Calm. That one is in the app list in your resources, I believe.
Okay. Does Camp Corral offer any camps where families can attend together? My son is very attached to his dad, and it would be very nervous for him to be alone as he's never really been away from home.
Yes, that is something, especially in this community, that we hear a lot. Children who are caregivers who have a wounded parent at home may have more anxiety and homesickness leaving their family. I would always encourage you to give it a try and see if they can do even just a day camp by themselves. But we are offering family camp this year for the first time. We are thrilled. We have 3 sessions this year, and you can find those on our website, thecampcorral.org, that's on your screen. And we'll be putting more information out about registration and all of that good stuff as we get closer to the applications opening in March.
Oh, that's wonderful. So that is great to hear. One of the other questions that came in is, what states are the camps actually in?
We are in a number of states, and this time of year, my team will tell you, I have a really hard time with numbers. I think we are in 17 states, but we are all over the country, East Coast to West Coast. We also do have travel scholarships available. If there is not a camp close to you, or if even just getting to the camp that's an hour from you is a financial burden, again, those camps are listed on our website, so you can see where we are all over the country.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Hannah. One of the other questions that came in here, how do you send a child to camp on their own if they have horrible separation anxiety? Is there anything that they can do to build up to this experience?
Yeah, one of the things we recommend kind of falls in line with that respite piece, sleepovers, and having your child just spend one night away with a friend or with a family member, whoever in your network can help support that, and build them up to being able to go to camp. Our staff are very much equipped to be able to work with children with that separation anxiety, being away from home. I also always recommend reaching out to the camp you're interested in. You can give us a call and we can help you get connected with the camp directors. They are very good at putting plans in place to help ease that anxiety, to help kids potentially talk to their counselor beforehand so they know who they're going to be with, and come up with an action plan to be able to help that child be successful at camp.
Great. Thank you so much. One of the other questions that came in is, if you need to ask your kids to help out, is there a limit to what you can ask? Like fixing meals or helping with personal needs? What would you recommend there?
I think this is a great question, and I think it's wholly dependent upon the child. And that's not to circumvent the question. Some kids are going to be stressed if you ask them to help. I have a child, my teen, we were like, you're learning how to cook before you move out of the house, right? So all of my teens can cook basics, but I have one preteen who loves to cook. So she loves to help me fix dinner one night a week. That's something that's not stressful for her. However, if I were to ask my 13-year-old to do it, it would not be good. So I think you know your kids best. I think it's perfectly acceptable to ask for help, ask for chores. When that becomes a burden to the child, I think that's maybe where we start talking about, is it too much? I think about how we grew up. We all had chores, we all had things we had to do. I don't think it's ever too much to ask for all of us as a family to work together as a family to keep our area neat, to keep it clean, to, put the bread back in the right place, right? But I think when you start dealing, my line in the sand has always been more caregiver items. Those I handle wholly. That's just what I do. But I hope that kind of helps maybe. I do think you know your kids best. It's really dependent upon your kids. Use their strengths. The one who loves to cook, let him cook. I have one who loves to clean bathrooms. I don't know why. Sure, go ahead, clean the bathroom, right? You know, play to your kid's strength. Make it a source of pride for them, something they want to do.
I love that. Well, that's great. How often do you have camps?
We have camp all summer long, so we usually start in the beginning of June and run through August. Now that is our typical summer camp program. As we're building out some of these wraparound services, we will have different peer groups and virtual opportunities throughout the whole year, which is very exciting.
That's great. And another question here is, how are the camps able to handle severe food allergies for their campers?
For the most part, very well. Food allergies are definitely a thing that they deal with on a daily basis, whether it's an adult retreat group coming in or children. Like I said earlier, it's always good to reach out to the camp you're interested in attending, whether it's a Camp Corral session or your local YMCA. That is something that the camp would encourage, is to have that conversation ahead of time, because they want to be prepared to help your child be successful and serve them to the best of their abilities. So have that honest conversation up front, ensure that you're comfortable with what the camp can facilitate for your child, and build a good relationship with them. And then as things happen, if they're at camp and there's a question about a product that they're serving for a meal, they won't hesitate to pick up the phone and call you and ask.
And I'll reiterate too, because I do have children with severe, or well, pretty significant food allergies. You have one camp on list this year that is phenomenal at them, and that is the Camp Corral session in August 1st in Georgia at Camp Southern Ground. That's just how they run their camp there. But that reiterates that much of what they're able to do is very based on the camp. So call the local camp. I pre-called mine. I was probably kind of annoying. Asked a lot of questions, said, do you need me to send food? We went through the whole thing, and honestly, it went really, really well. But the key step was definitely calling ahead, making sure that the camp you're interested in signing up for was able to handle it with their kitchen, and then touching base when you got there to drop off your kid. You know, this is so-and-so, she has this allergy. We made sure that our child knew exactly how to go get her food. Because they had a separate line for those with allergies, that they would serve them there. So making sure your child understands all of that too.
Great. Thank you guys so much. We're coming to the close here. I know you guys have a lot of great questions. Don't worry, when we send the follow-up email, you'll be able to contact Camp Corral to get any of these additional questions answered. Before we wrap up here, Hannah, Cara, is there anything else that you want to cover before we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you for everyone being here. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. My team gets to listen to me talk about it all the time, and I love to preach it from the mountaintops how important our children are in our military families. So thank you for being here. Please share this information with your friends, your coworkers. Really, we need to raise more awareness in our community about what our children are doing and how we can better support them.
And I just want to say thanks for coming. Thanks for having us and listening to the conversation. You know, don't be afraid to use resources. Don't be afraid to reach out. And just thank you for doing all that you do, not only to support your family, but to support your children as well, because we all know that we function better as a family when we all support each other. And that's when kind of healing and forward moving happens. So just thanks for coming, and thanks for listening tonight and all the wonderful questions. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Well, we also encourage everyone on today's webinar session, if you haven't already, to join our Facebook group called Hidden Heroes Caregiver Community. It's all about connection, validation, understanding, support, and resource sharing. That's what HHCC is all about. So if you care for a wounded, ill, injured service member or veteran, become part of our community by joining hiddenheroes.org/register. Also, if you see here on our screen here, this is where you could be on the lookout for upcoming C3 episodes. We also will have a recording from today's episode sent to you via email. It will be saved on our HHCC, and it will be available on the hiddenheroes.org/C3 website. Thank you for everyone for joining us today, and a big thanks again to our partners at the Wounded Warrior Project, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, for supporting our C3 series. We hope you found this session informative, inspirational. Stay in touch with our caregiver community, and always remember, you are not alone. We hope that you guys have a wonderful night. So sorry I wasn't able to say bye in video. I'm going to try it now to see if it doesn't mess up since it's the end. And I don't know if I'm there, but either way, just want to say thank you to everybody. We really appreciate you being here, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you, Hannah, Cara. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Jasmine, can I throw one more thing out before we close?
Absolutely.
I really wanted to circle back to this, and I found the answer. It is the crisis text line 741741. So Suicide National Line also has a text line, but that is the one that I know the crisis text line also works kind of in multiple scenarios. So I really wanted to make sure that before we left the seminar tonight, I had that answer for everyone.
Okay, perfect. And what we'll do, Cara, oh, it's up. Oh, here I am. Hi, guys. Oh, I missed you all. Thank you so much for my colleague, Colton Whitaker, who is helping out behind the scenes while I dealt with some technical issues here. Cara, what we'll do is I will grab that information from you so that way we can include that in our follow-up email, as well as with the PDF that we're going to be sending with all the handouts. You guys, now I'm on video after the end. But thank you guys so much again for being here. Our caregiver community, this was a wonderful episode to kick off our C3 series. We are so thrilled to continue this series into 2021. So be on the lookout for some more episodes coming in from us. And thank you guys again for being here. Hannah, Cara, you guys dominated the whole thing. I didn't even need to be here. You didn't even know. Thank you guys for handling everything. We really appreciate you being here and sharing this valid, really important information with us. Bye, guys. Have a wonderful day. Actually, night. Bye.